What does it take for a person to change their religion, to actually go through a transformation where they become, in some sense, more themselves and yet different? It's a very interesting phenomenon. Hi, I'm Michael Shevack. Welcome to Godsearch. Look, we're not going to debate if God exists or where God is, male, female, in between. What we're trying to do here is open up the living experience that we call good or God. The living experience, no matter who you are, whether you believe in God, don't believe in God, it doesn't much make a difference what religion you have. There is something. There is just something, the philosopher Kant called it a noumenal thing. It's a nice word. I love that word. It's this thing that you just ever so lightly can touch. And the more you have this experience called God, the more convinced you are it's the only proof you got. Hey, with me today is a very, very special guest. His name is David Kovacs. He is a philosopher and a theologian, and he is at it's Loyola Mary University. And his main work is all about the philosophy of God, or what he says is coming to be called classical theism. Hello, David. How are you?
Hello, Mick. Good to see you. Thank you for having me.
Sure, thank you. And I love that you're calling me Mick. I think I must have signed an email, Mick. It's something I really like doing, and it moves through me. I never know when I'm going to do it, and you're definitely a Mick person. So welcome. So, hey, it sounds pretty interesting. Um, David Kovacs, tell me about your God search.
Yes, well, I've been thinking about God and the existence of God and what we ought to say about God for a long time. I mean, I converted to Catholicism as a teenager. So I've been thinking about these issues since then. I majored in philosophy in college. And what I'm very interested in is the notion of God as creator. We sometimes distinguish monotheistic religions from the rest, right? Jews, Christians, Muslims on one side. But I think what unites us isn't so much a belief in one God, although we do all believe in the same one God, but it is our belief that we're created. We're created by an unfathomable mystery of love. And that's what a lot of my work has been exploring over the past few years. It's work that I think Jewish, Christian, and Muslim philosophers have all contributed to. I especially work on a medieval philosopher, Thomas Aquinas. I'm a Christian, but I mean, so much of his work is influenced by the Muslims, Avicenna and Averroes, and also Jewish philosophy through Maimonides. So that's where I am right now.
Sure. Well, let me ask you, let's go back for a second. You were a teenager. When most guys are at that age playing with other things, you were playing with God, and that's an interesting thing. So how did you come about that? What did you sense? How did you find your way to a new religion?
Yeah, that's a really good question because you're asking me about decisions I made as a teenager that I still stand by. But I mean, how many of us can remember what we were thinking of when we made our teenage decisions?
Sure.
Well, I wasn't. My parents weren't really churchgoers. I went to Protestant churches with kids from school. But I mean, growing up in Northeast Ohio, there was a lot of different kind of religious strands in the air. There's a strong Eastern European Catholic influence. There's many, especially when you get towards Cleveland, a lot of Muslims, but also a lot of different strands of Protestantism. And some of the churches that I would go to with my friends, I don't want to put down any of them. I won't name any of the particular sects. But the politics was kind of, I thought, in a kind of right-wingy kind of way. And I thought that doesn't really seem like what I'm reading in the Bible that they're telling me to read. So when I went to high school, my parents did send me to a Catholic high school. And that's where I started to explore questions in a little bit of a different way and start to get into certain historical thinkers and things like that.
Oh, and so did you feel that you were drawn, there was a kind of a mystery within the church that drew you to her, that she was speaking
Yes,
the language?
yes. I think I think the notion of mystery is very important, not in a flippant way, not in a don't ask questions, that's just mystery kind of way. But I think that the notion of mystery, the fact that you say playing with God, and I like that phrase, but it's playing with the unknown. We're playing with the unknown lover, the unknown friend. And I think that those religious traditions that emphasize that aspect of the unknown, that apophatic ignorance that we're all caught up in when we pray, is very important to me.
Yeah, I'm excited about what you were saying. I mean, I did a previous podcast where I'm have my viewpoint is that everyone thinks they're worshiping the same God, but they're not worshiping the same God. And if you look very closely, there are really big differences. But what I was just very excited about was the fact that you boiled past all of that by going to the heart of of a one God theology, which is that this is not just any old God. This is a creator God. This is a God whose very being is somehow the origin of your being. Okay, where it's personal. And I really like that. And of course, hey, it's hard to debate love. It's really hard to debate love. The question is, can you find it in a Holocaust? And I believe you can. But so tell me about the creator God and the perfect divine, the sublime loving God, because I'll buy that those two things are pretty much the same. That I'll buy.
Good, yes. Well, my view is that there's probably many more theists in America today than the polls might show sometimes. I think that theism is a matter of saying that a question is legitimate. And the question is, why anything rather than nothing? Why any universe at all? I don't claim to have an answer to that question. I can say, yes, the answer is love. I will say that. But I mean, I don't know what that love is exactly. But anybody who's willing to say that the question, why something rather than nothing? What is the cause of everything? As soon as you get to that question and recognize it as a real question, not a question like, when are you going to stop kicking puppies? Not a question like, why is 2 squared 7? Those are illegitimate questions. But what is the reason for something rather than nothing? Why any universe at all? If you can see the sense of that question, then I think that you believe in God, even if you might not like the language that religious people use for talking about it. And yes, I think that there's ways of seeing that whatever the answer is, call it God, or call it something other word if you'd like, but the answer has something to do with an unfathomable mystery of love.
Where help me through this. I have the same problem within my own Jewish ranks at times, and this is and I have the same difficulty if I follow through some of the scientific stuff, the cosmologies that are taking place. It seems to me that I don't need to ask the question why there is any universe or any universe at all, because either I'm going to assume that that universe would exist, and therefore I might as well assume that which preceded it. So the assumption is the same, whether or not I'm assuming a creative God before that, or whether I'm assuming a creative universe from which any other universe that also bears traits of creativity can be born. To me, the assumption, I'm not debating the issue of love. I don't know whether you'd agree. I define in very raw terms that the love of God is God's own affinity for God's own self. And that's how I would define it on the simplest abstract level, so that any action requiring God's own relationship with God has in it some scale, if you don't mind using that word, of God in it. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would agree absolutely with that. I mean, this is a philosophical question that Aquinas has to deal with. Why should God know or love anything other than God? Isn't that a bit below the divine supreme being, to be worried about us? Well, Aquinas' answer to that is that God first and foremost knows and loves God, but that involves knowing and loving God's creation. And I think what's beautiful about that is that means that God's knowledge and love for us is nothing more or less than a knowledge and love of a reflection of God. We are mirrors, we are imitations of ways that God's perfection can be. And that's what God knows when God thinks of us, if you prefer, if I can use that phrase, God thinking of us. I think it's a bit odd, but when God thinks of us, he thinks of us just as the beautiful creations that God makes as an imitation of God's own beauty. Now, to your first question about how to think about this notion of a cause, I think it's quite possible the universe has always existed. It's possible. I mean, we'd have to ask scientists whether I'm saying anything sensible, but even a universe that's always existed, I think, can raise the God question. Why an eternal universe? Even if that's a reasonable question, we have a question to ask why. And whatever the answer is, I just use the word God as a placeholder, really.
You're doing one other thing, which I think is really important. And I'm really glad you're doing it because it's not properly highlighted, especially in the religious divisiveness that is going on, is you are highlighting the creative aspect of God. Leave aside the love issue, which is a nice thing, but it's very much a personal, that's a personal experience of it. But a creator, whether it's a creator of a universe, multiple universe, or it is a universe from which subordinate universes are derived, that refers to a quality of what this is. It's living in some fashion. It's incomplete in itself. It becomes more of itself by changing itself into whatever it comes on some scale. So I think I totally agree, and I really get annoyed by some of the classic theology where God has to be somewhat other, and then there is a creation, and then all of these bridges need to be built. Okay. You create something which is so austerely separate, then you build a bridge over your own separation. So I'm glad you said that, because I think the Greeks were onto something when they had an eternal, an eternal, olam in Hebrew. It's like it's a foreverness that's also the world. So I think but I think the key issue is not the scale of a pre-existing universe and then asking why it becomes more. The question is that it becomes more and it is incomplete unto itself because it is always growing and learning and self-affinatiously becoming more. And that to me is that creatorship to me is the most exciting thing. And I think it's where I don't know, maybe you disagree, but I think this is where religions went off base, is that they concentrated too much on the God of history or the God of their own selves, but did not focus on the innate ubiquity, not even universality, the ubiquity of a creator God. So I think you got something really, really important here. So why are you so fascinated by Aquinas? I'm fascinated by Aquinas, by the way. I think Aquinas rocks. Okay. And I think half the problems we're dealing here with Blue Party and Red Party are all Aquinian issues. And tell me why you're such a fan of Tommy.
Oh, well, that's I often think that philosophers gravitate towards the philosophers that they find themselves understanding and resonating with, and it just kind of sets in and becomes the habit. My relationship with Aquinas has changed a lot over the years. When you start studying a philosopher like that, you become kind of a dogmatist. You go around for a while saying, I know the truth because Aquinas said X, so X must be right. Nowadays, decades after I first started reading Aquinas, Now I read him as a dialogue partner because we agree on kind of fundamental vocabulary issues. But now when I read him, I can ask the text, I can ask Aquinas, if you will. It's like I think maybe I can improve that line of thought a bit, or maybe that's not quite the right way to go. And I think Aquinas is just a thinker who opens himself up to that. Beginners with Aquinas tend to be dogmatic with it, but I think the more you get to know him, the more you see that Aquinas never would have wanted that. Aquinas would have, I think, maybe been a little bit horrified at the extent to which he's treated as an authority in the Catholic Church today. Although I'm glad that it's him and maybe not somebody else. But I don't think he ever intended his own thinking to be any more than a starting point for people to work out what to say about the unsayable, how to think about the ineffable.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by him also for the same reason in terms of interreligious dialogue, because the impregnation of Arabic philosophy into the Rambam, into Maimonides, and then Aquinas picking up the guide for the perplexed and he just did the most magnificently pure job of fusing these things in a systematization that, no matter how far you go, you will always come back. And that's the value of Aquinas, is that the skeletal structure of every question you're going to ask is right there. In what way do you think that he's valuable today for people who are struggling?
Well, I think Aquinas. Well, to go back to what I said a moment ago, that I think there's more theists today than who realize that they are theists, and I think if you spend time seriously reading certain things Aquinas says about God, and if you read them at least in the right light, you start to see that, what he believes about God and about the creation of the universe might be what people already think. I mean, how many? Maybe you've interviewed people on this podcast, people who celebrities say it all the time. I believe there's something. I can't believe that the universe just makes itself, or something like that. And when you read Aquinas, you start to realize that for him, that's theism. Theism is almost more of an attitude than a proposition. It's more of a way of looking at the world than a belief about the world.
Yeah, I mean, I consider theism as any kind of proposition to be a theory. And to me, it's a theory, and it's a very good theory. And I'm not particularly disturbed by it, because if I have a better theory, it just has to handle the data. So I'm not frightened by whether you call a theory theism. It happens to work very, very well if you have a belief that there is some kind of very substantial being that can reflect upon itself to create realities out of, itself, which is new. And newness, I think, is the most exciting thing about it. How does this, that interreligious dialogue is just really important. And I said the creator God is great, and love is really critical. As a Catholic, there's been so much interreligious dialogue, just an astonishing over 35 years of Jewish Catholic reconciliation. I've been involved in it. And just an absolute revolution that took place after, Pope John. How do you feel about the current events in the Middle East as a Christian, as a Catholic Christian? Do you relate to it in any kind of, theological way for yourself?
Well, it's very disheartening to see the monotheists of the world at war with each other.
Really?
That's disheartening. Um, 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 as you say, I think the call is for us to be working together, to show the world, to show each other what beauty we've discovered in the kinds of things that you and I are talking about right now when we talk about God. I've been very fortunate over the years. I've had housemates and roommates who are Muslims, devout, and I've worked with a number of Jewish people, and that's the kind of activity I enjoy, is where we can talk to each other, and maybe even help each other see the beauty of God. And the Middle East, I think, is a bit of a scandal on that project right now.
Yeah. What help me because you know, I'm okay with the creator God, as I told you, in love. I get it. Right. And I think they're really strong common viewpoints and very simple. Help me through the differences in historical expectations. It seems to me that every time we hit some kind of personal eschatological viewpoint, for those people watching, by the way, it means like the end times, it's a fancy word. The end time stuff and the expectations, this is going to happen, that's going to happen, he's going to come, we're going to go there. We always break down at the point on that. And how are we as theists, okay? How do we handle those kind of sacred differences?
Um, well, maybe you're referring to something specific that I'm missing. I mean, it's hard for me to imagine having a serious dispute with somebody about an eschatological issue.
Certain Christians, not all Christians, have a certain belief that Jesus will either return or we're going somewhere. Most people don't know that. By the way, you should know that out there. Okay. Muslims also believe that Jesus is coming back. I consider them a variation in a very real way of Christian teachings. Okay. So here you have different belief systems on what's going to happen. Jews, we're going to own the hot dog stand. We'll wait and see what happens, and then we'll see what goes on. We adapt the wait and see. Okay. But how do you handle the actual core differences of expectations?
Mm.
And yet there are certain religions that hold themselves to have a one true faith. Now, how do you deal with that? Because I find it very difficult.
For me, it is difficult. What I come back to, when I can, when I remember to, is what's the job Jesus gave me to do? The job Jesus gave me to do isn't to try to convince somebody of an eschatological theory. My job is to try to help people and to make people's lives better, and to practice what Christians call the works of mercy, which includes things like feeding the hungry, and teaching the people who need taught. Differences are good to discuss. Um, um, but I mean, my job, I don't think, is to go out and convince people of. In fact, Jesus says not to try to predict when he's going to return. He says nobody knows. I take that as an admonition not to try to figure it out. He says, yes, there will be signs, but he doesn't seem to think that we're supposed to be trying to interpret signs. So yeah, when those difficulties come from, I can't control what anybody else does, right? If somebody else is going to be a bad actor, then I just have to remember, well, what does Jesus tell me to do in these situations?
So then you don't feel any inherent contradictions because you stay focused on the task of love and mercy and justice and these.
I'm not. I mean, not lived contradictions. I mean, certainly there's a contradiction when you say God is not Trinity and I say God is Trinity. Okay, we've contradicted each other, but I mean, here we are having a friendly conversation about God. There's no reason you and I can't be, in Christian language, I would say brothers, right? Spiritual brothers, even as we discuss contradictions.
Okay, just one second. Hey, welcome to Godsearch. If you've been listening, David Kovacs, philosopher and theologian, talking about his particular Godsearch, which is really interesting. If you're an Aquinas fan, stay on. This is Michael Shevack. So let me ask you, as you progress, I know from my point of view that as I progress on my life, that there is this just exquisite deepening of something that is not, it isn't just, it is me, but I know I can sense it's not me. I'm a face on it. Do you have any of these really beautiful senses that happen as you continue with your God search? Is it an
Yes.
intellectual exercise? What happens to you as a person?
Yeah, I mean, the spiritual life, the God search, is a life of ups and downs. There's days where you think, oh, God, this is the love that God calls me to. I start to get a little glimpse of how God loves me and the love that God wants me to show others. And then of course there's the dark nights of the soul, as they say, where it just feels like nothing's happening. But of course, even those dark phases are there because you realize later, oh, even then the growth was happening. The growth was happening beneath the soil where I couldn't see it. But it's all, sometimes it is later when you're reflecting on things that happen, or when I'm reflecting on things that happen anyway. Yes, I was simply saying that I think that's it's in the reflecting back that we sometimes see that the growth was happening beneath the soil.
Yeah, that's a phenomenon that I've noticed a lot. It's almost like materially my wake up comes afterwards, and I kind of have to wait for the seed coat on to crack in order to see what the plant was. You know what I mean? But yet it's it's like, you know what it is, David? It's kind of like a download where the last step is you got to turn the computer off. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's good.
Get a download and then you got to turn the computer off in order to reboot it. And I oftentimes, because I'm a big fan of Christian scripture as well. I oftentimes think that when Jesus says lama sabachthani, he's praying in Aramaic to that he's feeling abandoned. It's almost like sometimes I feel like he's lost his Jedi powers and he's like stuck. He's just a clod of flesh, and the download's coming, but the bottom is turning off because he's got to reboot and in order to take a higher program on. And that's kind of how I view the seed coat experience. I think we all kind of have that.
I think that's right. I mean, the grandfather of all faith journeys is Abraham, who has to journey in tents and doesn't know where he's going, and sometimes gets himself in trouble lying about his wife and things like that. I think that's the original template for every God search.
Yeah, I consider him, even though the rabbinic tradition and the midrash is very poetic and they extol him as being all of this incredibly amazing guy, and then they have a problem if he does something like lie to Pharaoh about his wife. I've always considered, I mean, I don't over idealize him. I've always seen him very simply as just a guy who wants to get married, wants to have babies, and wants to make a buck and have his own land and his own kids. I've seen him basically like, would you show me? Because this ain't working. I don't have any children. I don't have any money. My wife's old. She's sick. How the hell is this going to take place? So I see him as every man, okay? And I see Sarah as every woman, not just as some kind of like miraculous saint who's feeling faith, but just the everyday faith we need to just kind of, you know, have sex, makes babies, and make money. It's just kind of a basic thing, you know. So what if you were right now to walk into the Middle East armed with nothing but Aquinas and your faith? Tell me what you would say to the Israeli people. Tell me what you'd say to the Iranians and Hamas.
Well, don't shoot. We'll start there.
Don't shoot. I love that. That's great.
Um, well, yeah. So there I am, a Christian in the Middle East with Israel and Palestine and the Muslims and everything on every side of me. What do I want to say? I'm not an expert on the Middle East. I try to keep up with it, but the question that I wonder if anyone really knows what's being fought. What's this is what frustrates me when I think about it. Is what's really at stake. What are we getting out of this? What do you get out of this? What do I get out of this? What does your nation, your side, your religion get out of this? Is it really worth it? Sometimes I feel like those are the questions to begin with. The Zen monk Thich Nhat Hanh, he always said that if he were to go to the Middle East, he'd have him sit down and do breathing exercises. Well, maybe we could start with finding some psalm that's common to all three of our traditions.
Yeah, I just got back from Sarajevo.
I think starting with the common ground.
Yeah, I got back from Sarajevo last week. It was a very interesting thing because everyone there seems to get along remarkably well. And maybe it's the common misery that brought them together. What is Israel to you as a Catholic?
Yeah, that's a good question because I think especially in today's political atmosphere, the Catholics have to find a way to walk the middle ground between, on the one side, we have to admit it's the church's position that God's covenant with the Jewish people is God's covenant with the Jewish people. It doesn't get revoked. It hasn't been replaced. It hasn't been updated. There's no covenant 2.0. That's the Catholic position on the one hand. On the other hand, I don't think we have to numerically identify the kingdom of David and Israel with Benjamin Netanyahu's government. I thought a question like this might come up, and my answer is that what is Israel? That's a question I think Jewish people have to work out. The modern nation of Israel was created with that context. What is it to me? It's a question that has to be figured out, and I'm not the expert to figure it out.
Let me put you on the spot.
I'd rather just help Christians figure out what to say about it.
But let me put you on the spot, okay? There's Israel, who's the modern state. Then there's Israel, who is the Solomonic borders of the original kingdom. Then there's Israel, which for you is a fulfilled and new Israel. The Latin doesn't have the new covenant, it's new covenant. Israel as you is a real entity, even though you're not quote unquote Jewish, you are adopted in your faith to Abraham, and he being Hebrew makes you adopted as a Hebrew. This is in our literature as well. So as Israel, who are you?
Yes, that's a good question.
See, your Israelness is in you.
Yes.
By virtue.
I'm a descendant of Abraham. I would say I'm a descendant of Abraham.
It's the only position that you could take is that you're a descendant of Abraham. And since I am too, except, maybe a little more directly spunk, but, you're a descendant. What does this mean for you? Because we'll debate territory and stuff, but you are Israel by your self-understanding.
Oh, good. I like that question. So to be a descendant of Abraham, I think, is to recognize that we're on that God search. We're on that faith journey. We're on that quest that goes from tent to tent and tribe to tribe and into the unknown. And that's what our life is. That's all Abraham's life was by the end, was the journey. And that's all our earthly life is the journey into the unknown. It's a daily struggle. It's one full of twists and turns.
So you find inspiration in the wandering and the meandering.
Yeah, I do.
That's very Jewish. By the way, out there, go to yourgodsearch.com. Send us a message send Professor David Kovacs a note, send me a note, and we'll talk about this more. So the wandering that Abraham goes through, you consider almost like a paradigm of everyday living for you.
I do, yes. And like you said, the whole book of Genesis is filled with scoundrels. God is constantly working with what we would not expect the divine supremacy to work with.
Yeah, I give my people a lot of credit for including in their sacred texts the worst of us. Bertrand Russell, when he was not very fond of being labeled a Christian, but he said of the two scriptures, he tended to believe Jews were right because they put every miserable story and every deflated, horrible king in their scripture. He said, who would do that? So I'm kind of proud that we have these, have such an ignoble, Just scripture. The wandering, though, is very interesting. Do you experience the actual creator in a loving way, moment to moment, inch by inch, as you wander through the events in your life? Is that something that's palpable to you?
Well, if it were that palpable, I think I would stop sinning. And yet here I am. I still gossip. I still have bad thoughts about people. I still get impatient. So to the extent that I do those things, I have to say that maybe I don't. But to the extent that I'm sometimes a good person and that I sometimes freely choose to do good things, my view is that a human free action is an action that's brought about entirely by God and nothing else. So if I freely choose to help someone, that is my experience of God.
So by definition, though, if you are coerced into it, even by a rule or a law that says you should do this, it's not a completely divine empowered act.
It's not completely divine, you might say, but I mean, God is everywhere.
So even in the speed limits.
Yes.
So just how do you, okay, help me here, because if I have a creator that is in some measure beyond the universe which I occupy, why is it that my expectations of myself in not gossiping are God's? Yeah, are they not two different moral codes? Wouldn't God's relationship, isn't God always talking to himself, and that how God creates? In other words, here you mentioned something like gossip, which I realize it's lashon hara in Hebrew. It's not a good thing, right? It's it's like murder. It's a tantamount to murder. But that's a human experience of what is good for human civilization. Are you saying that God, the creator, is held to the same exact accountability as a human being?
No. In fact, this is when I do philosophy and think about the problem of evil, a crucial move I have to make is that there can be no moral code that obliges God.
Thing. And just would you fill us in more about that? Because that's very, very interesting.
Yes. So my view is that even our bad actions, our sins, even those are part of our God search, right? If I do something bad, I'm still in a way trying to aim at God. I'm just doing it really badly. I'm aiming in a very bad way. Um, 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 but God is still trying to pull me, even in those situations. Um, um, and the fact that it's I who fail, the fact that it's true, God could have done a miracle and stopped me from doing something bad, but I don't think God has a moral obligation to have done so. God makes us the kinds of creatures who can think about our actions and choose accordingly. That's just what God makes us to be.
And does God have those requirements of God's own self? If you read, the Hebrew scriptures, God has to wrestle with his own conscience,
Hmm.
in terms of Sodom and Gomorrah, in terms of wiping out the Israelites after Egypt, even repenting. I mean, this is a creator God that gets through creating human beings and says, I should have had a V8. The whole thing is like, what did I do here? I mean, you know, is do you feel that God is actually self-reflective in that fashion, that God can create what God does not know, be surprised by his actions and repentant?
My answer to that would be no.
No. And so you're distinguishing, therefore, God, the creator, in a slightly different camp than God, who is mortal.
Yes, I think that's fair.
All right. And so, therefore, I have great admiration for the necessity here for a Trinitarian concept that permits the two to harmonize in fullness. Hi, and this is Michael Shevack. I really have to apologize Forgive me, we have a technical problem, and the computer cut off about 6 minutes so of Dr. Kovacs's discussion on wandering and meandering and the spiritual value of it. So I really do apologize to you out there, and I do apologize to the good doctor, and hopefully he will not hold this against me and it will show up on Godsearch at another time. Again, this is Michael Shevack. Thank you so much for coming to Godsearch every Wednesday about 1:40, well, around 5:45 a.m. Eastern Daytime, and go to yourgodsearch.com and communicate with us. Let us know how you feel and what your God search is about. So discover God, uncover God, and if you had a raw deal with the religion that you were born with, hey, why don't you try to find a religion that speaks to your heart and open up the experience called God? Happy God searching. God bless. Bye-bye.